Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Today our movie in the middle is books. So today we're going to be doing something a little bit different and something that I do want to talk about probably at least once a year, which is books. If you've watched my channel, you know that I like movies a little bit, but that's not the only thing about me. I am actually a huge reader and I love reading and books as well. Now, I am one of those kids who read all the time when I was a child. A younger child. I'm still a child. However, as I got out of high school into college, I had less time to read. I probably had less of an attention span, and I kind of fell off reading for a long time. But in the last couple years, I've been kind of getting back into it. And despite what my brother says, no, I did not read Harry Potter 4 times just to get back into reading. Come on. Shut up. But I really just got back into the entire process of it, the entire love for it, the lifestyle, everything, and I've been loving catching up on a lot of these old books. Now, I did discover that I really liked watching YouTube videos of people ranking books and doing reading vlogs and things like that, and that was really getting me motivated for it. You know, it was really cool because you'd see what they liked that year, what was trending, them making tea and opening the curtains and making all these nice little healthy meals and going for walks and all this soft music, and then I realized it's just book talk. I fell in love with book talk. I didn't even realize what book talk was until I was already deep in it. It was something that I had to confront. But the thing is I got so out of reading for a bit that I am still catching up on just classics and ones that people have been talking about forever, much less all the new ones. I mean, people are all Colleen Hoover this and Court of Thorn and Roses that. I have no clue. I just read The Great Gatsby 2 years ago. So that's where we're at. But last year, I actually read the most books I have read in a long time in a single year. I mean, we're talking more than, hey, I finished Percy Jackson finally. I actually read 6 books and a short story last year, which to the average reader on YouTube is like laughable. They're reading like 40 books a year. But that was like way more than I had read in a long time. And so I actually finally get a chance to do like a whole ranking because it's not like I'm just talking about 2 books that I read. You know, I'm going to be actually going through a couple of them, which is pretty fun. So that is what we're going to be doing today. So starting off with the one book that I have on my DNF, or for people who aren't really into like reading, book talk and all of that, that is the did not finish list. And that is A Deadly Education. I got this at a book swap party, and that was the first one I'd ever been to, the only one I've ever actually been to, and it was really, really fun, where basically you go and you wrap a book and everybody picks one and, you know, they don't open it until a little bit later, and then you see what you got, and then you can trade them and all that. And between the cover, I mean, look at this cover. That's like super cool. And the fact that it was like a very dark version of like the whole wizard school, magic school sort of thing, like that cool angle, I was like, this is absolutely gonna be my shit. And it even got to the point where somebody stole it from me, and then they just gave it back because they knew that this was my thing. Now, I started reading it, and I got about 40 pages in, and I just couldn't do it. It takes a lot for me to not finish something because I am a perfectionist. You know this. It takes a lot for me to not finish something. Here's the reason I didn't finish it, and apparently I'm not the only one on these couple of points. Mostly it's because it's really weirdly dense. Like, there is so much exposition and information and context thrown at you in just the first little bit. And that's fine. I mean, obviously context and exposition is gonna have to happen in the beginning of a book, especially when you're setting up a world. And a lot of the world, I will say, I actually find really, really cool. Like, there's an entire thing where their dorms have a whole 4th wall that's not even a wall. It's a void that you can pull stuff out of magically. That's so cool. The problem is that all of this information is just consistently stream of consciousness thrown at you, and you don't get a breather, and it's trying to figure out all of this like historical context and everything. And I don't know, it's just like a lot of books do it really well. This one just felt like I'm being ambushed and I can't keep track. I literally could not remember what page I was on every time I came back to it. Granted, I could have used a bookmark. I have a few. I would literally forget what line I was on or what page or even what chapter I was on because it just felt so all pushed together, and I was really confused at a certain point. The other main thing about it too is that the way it's told is from the first person of the main character, who is honestly not that likable. It's like the whole point is that you have to make friends and connections because you're gonna go out into this world that's just monsters and deadly magic, and you have to make these networking connections so that you can get into these enclaves and be safe. The problem is that the main character sucks at doing that, but by her own volition. Like, okay, obviously there's a lot of main characters who this is a problem, like Katniss, and they did that really well. Like, you have to make these connections, and you have to make people like you in order to survive, and it goes through, like, the arc of her doing that. Now, obviously, I only got 40 pages in, so maybe that happens, but it feels like she's just not trying at all. And it really bothered me, and I just didn't like her as a narrator. She's really cynical and kind of boring. And I don't know. And like even the school itself is very, very cool, but some of the stuff doesn't quite make sense. It's a safe haven for a bit, but there's still creatures coming in every so often, and you have to fight them off, which is cool. I don't know. It just feels like there was something lacking in the world building. I think it was just the overall tone of the book and just the onslaught of information that I was like, look, maybe I'll come back to this. It's on the back burner because, again, it looks really cool. It's the type of book that I should definitely like, but for some reason, I just couldn't finish it. And I could talk about that more maybe if I actually do finish it or keep going with it. I could talk about it a little bit more, but those are kind of my overall thoughts about why I didn't finish it. Before I get into the actual list of all the ones I did finish, I want to talk about the short story that I read, which was The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. I wanted to pick one that I could read during October, and it's only like, 25 pages or so, and it was pretty straightforward. It's pretty much what I was expecting. It was The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. What I didn't expect was that the actual Headless Horseman part is so little of the story. It's like 2.5 pages out of 25, which, I mean, to be fair, it is just the end of like the main story when you see it in like a film interpretation or, like the little cartoon animation, which we watch every year. We love that one. It was fine. Like, I was just kind of I wanted to see, more of the Headless Horseman. I thought that'd be kind of cool. But again, this was the original. It was written way long ago, and it was mostly about the setup to that. What the story actually focuses on so much, which is actually something that is focused on in another book that I'm going to talk about in a minute, is like just describing like nature and the food. Like he wanted to list out every single piece of food that was on the table and every single bird that was in a tree. And I think this was just something at the time that they did. I cannot remember a lot of different like points in literature history that I learned about. I know there's transcendentalism and, romanticism and all of that, so I can't remember which one it would be. I have to go back and look all that up. But I think this was definitely something that they did, was focusing a lot on nature at that time. And it's a big thing in this one. And it helps that like the main character eats a shit ton. That's like his big thing, is just like eating and enjoying himself. But after a while, I was like, listen, okay, I know there's like 7 different types of pies. Can we get to the action? I will say it was cool, though, getting more description on like Brom Bones and on Ichabod Crane. And it's funny because Ichabod Crane isn't actually like that good of a person in the story. It's really weird. And Brom Bones, he sucks. And there's some cool speculation about whether Brom was the Headless Horseman himself. But it was pretty straightforward. It was what I was expecting. It was just cool getting to see all the little details and everything that you don't really get from the animated one, and all like the kind of more adult details that you get. And it was just like a nice fall read. It was pretty cool. All right, on to the actual 6 whole books that I read last year, starting with the bottom to the top. And it's not to say that any of these were bad, but I have my reasons for ranking them this way. Number 6 was The Thief Lord. Now, obviously, this is a more of a children's book, and that is why it is at the bottom. Not to say that children's books are bad by any means. I am writing children's books, but this is a very small child's book. I have had this, as well as a couple of other Cornelia Funk books, on my shelf forever, and I just never read them. Except for Inkheart. I actually read that one and really love that one, and I actually want to finish that series, the Inkspell and Ink Death. I never actually did that. But this was one that I was really excited to read because it wasn't necessarily like fantasy, but it took place in Venice. It was about like these small children who are like thieves, and it's like a little, kind of motley crew of these little kids, and they're kind of on their own, which is great for kids to read. Well, not like, morally, but like adventure-wise, because they can see themselves doing that. They can see themselves running through Venice themselves, whatever they want to do. I mean, that's so cool for a kid. Problem is I am 26 years old, and although this was a very cool idea, the kids and even the adults just don't talk like people. I don't know. Maybe the kids talk like kids, and I respect that part of the book. but even the adults, they just don't act like adults. And although the plot was pretty cool in concept, it was kind of boring to me. It didn't feel like it went anywhere, and there is actually a magical element to this book that doesn't come up until like the last 75 pages, and it's like 350 pages. So like it's a very easy read. It was just didn't keep me that entertained. And even the magical stuff that happened at the end didn't feel like there was a whole lot of stakes. I don't know. It is definitely a book that young children would love. It's like the sense of freedom and magic and being on your own and being rebellious, and that's all very cool. Just reading it as an adult, it's like, okay, it's not for me. The weird thing is that if I went back and read Inkheart, I bet, from what I remember, I bet that would probably hold up better as an adult. It's just the writing of this one just felt really weird. I don't know. It just felt very more for children. That being said, it's one that's really good for children to read. I'm glad I did read it because I can say that I have it off my shelf. There's like 800 books on my shelf that I have to read. So I'm getting through them. Next up is Sun, which is the final in the Quartet of the Giver series, and I didn't know for the longest time that The Giver was actually a series. I thought it was just its own standalone book, and it is absolutely one of my favorite books of all time. I read it first, I think, in 5th or 7th grade, and just the whole concept. I mean, I did my In Defense of the Giver movie way at the beginning of the channel, so you guys know that I loved this story. So I went and read the whole thing, and I can get more into like the whole series another time because I have a lot of thoughts on them. The Giver series is really interesting just generally because while it is very magical, it's not like overly fantasy. It's very subtly done. The way Lois Lowry writes is very easy, but also it seems like it should be boring, but it's just like nice. It's like kind of oh God, I'm gonna say it. It's kind of cozy. Okay, for all the book talkers out there, fine, I said it. And even if all of them aren't super grandiose, like especially in Gathering Blue and Messenger, I liked what they did. In this one, however, which was written way after the trilogy ended, so I think that's part of it, is that this was kind of an add-on that ties all of them together. I thought the concept was cool, but again, I was kind of bored by it. And it's way thicker than the other ones. The other ones are like, maybe 200 pages, give or take. This one was like, it's almost 400 pages. And I don't know, I just wasn't that interested in so much of it. I like the concept that it's like, this mother looking for her long lost son. And, it ties kind of all of the communities and everything together that are developed in the series. But for most of it, I was just kind of bored at the general day-to-day, waiting for things to happen. And it's split up into like 3 different parts, and some of it was fun, some of it wasn't that interesting to me. Even when it got too close to the end, I was like, okay, what are we doing? And it finally gets to this point where there's like a final battle sort of thing that happens. And that was cool. I don't know. I guess it just feels like it didn't have a super big impact on me. I was kind of thinking that there was going to be more coming together. But again, the way she writes, the way she storytells, it's a lot smaller, but very meaningful. So I definitely wanted more from it. It's definitely my least favorite of the quartet, but it still had some really cool things. And the Giver series as a whole is really, really great. At number 4 is A Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula K. Le Guin. And A Wizard of Earthsea is one of the big fantasy series that I've always been told to read. And I finally picked it up and I was super excited about it. I liked it, not as much as I thought I would. I did like it a lot. What I really like about it is that it's something that actually she says in like this afterword at the end, is that it's not really like this huge war. So much fantasy relies on good versus evil in terms of battles and like humans versus other humans, man versus man. In this one, it's man versus self. And that was very interesting. It's a very internal good versus evil conflict. And so it didn't rely on just like battle strategies. It was like a journey. And that was really, really cool. Just the general like setting was interesting. I'm not a huge person on sea stuff, like oceans and sailing. Whenever books talk about that, I start to get a little bit bored because I don't care about rigging and masts and fore and aft. I don't know, whatever. So you can imagine I just absolutely hate Old Man in the Sea. Not a fan. However, with this one, it was pretty cool because although it is an archipelago, I think that's how you say it, which is, basically just a lot of water and then a lot of different islands. There's like 90 some islands, I think. It was cool because there's a map at the beginning. And I don't think I've ever referred to a map more than it when I was reading this, because there's so many islands that he goes to, and it's kind of cool to see how all of them are a little bit different. I wish we got more in depth about like a few of them rather than just like highlighting a ton of them, but it was really cool geographically to kind of see where he was going this whole time and to follow that. And it's something I never thought I'd say because I don't give a crap about geography, but it was pretty cool. The thing about it is that it feels like there's just things happening. It just continues to happen. And I'm so used to stories where we spend a lot of time in one place. We're setting it up and then we're going to spend a lot of time there. I wasn't used to what apparently is what a lot of fantasies were like back then, where they just kind of went from place to place. So like, you know, we start here and then he goes there and then I'm like, okay, we're going to spend some time here. Just kidding, we're going there now. And then he's in this magic school and I'm like, all right, so we got to be here for a little bit, right? And we are actually there for 2 out of 10 chapters, so that is 20% of the book. But it just feels like, okay, we're done, go, move on. And I'm like, so I feel like we're not getting in depth in any one training or lesson. That being said, with the school, there was a good amount of stuff where there was a lot of pages, you know, based on this is how this magic works. This is how we name things and this is how we see them. And that was cool. My problem with that is that it's so unique and it's such a very deep look at what magic could be and naming everything and how you do spells, and it gives limitations and it gives challenges to being a wizard and a mage. The problem was it felt like it was so unique that I needed more explanation. It just kind of felt, for me, my big thing with this one is that it just went from thing to thing, and I felt like I was never in one spot. You know that whole like show don't tell thing, which, you know, obviously is like not all the time, you have to tell sometimes. It felt like this book was a lot of telling and a little bit less of showing. I liked it enough. I really liked the magic side of it. I'm hesitant. I want to read the others, but I feel like it just took me so long to get through this one, and it was pretty short, that I might come back to Earthsea at another point in time. I'm going to put that one on the back burner as well. All right, getting down to our top 3. At number 3 is The Picture of Dorian Gray. Now, I picked this up because the concept sounded really, really cool. This painting, of this guy takes on all of his sins and vices and age, and he stays young in the painting. And it's like, that's going to be some really cool internal stuff going on, you know, and a lot of really cool, it's not like science fiction, but it's kind of supernatural in a way, which is really, really interesting. Now, again, this is written in like the 1800s, right? When was this written? Why doesn't this tell me when it was written? According to this book, this edition, this was written in 2022. So that climbed the ladder fast. But I'm like 99% sure this was written in the late 1800s. And there is a foreword, I guess sort of even like a manifesto by Oscar Wilde at the beginning talking about art. And that is a very, very important list of context, I guess, into how you should view this book. Because it's his look on what he thinks of art and how like some art is useless, but art is just there and it's just supposed to be beautiful. It's not supposed to mean anything. And there's a lot of stuff that I had to like sort out there because I obviously think that art is supposed to mean something. But it's very interesting. It's one of those books that gets in your brain thinking like, forget everything you think you knew about art because maybe you're wrong. It's one of those books where if you think one way about something, after reading the book, you would probably think, you'd be like, okay, well, that was a cool opinion, but I don't share that opinion. But then it gets in your brain like, wait a minute, what if I'm wrong about art? What I didn't expect was that the part where the painting actually starts to corrupt didn't come to like almost halfway, maybe about a third of the way through the book. So I guess that kind of makes sense. But I liked all of that. That was really interesting. And his like fears, of what was happening there and how it affected him. And he was like, actually, this is kind of cool. And then he was like, shit, this is really bad. And everything started to go really awry and wrong in his life. But what was really interesting was all of these philosophical discussions, which happens a lot in these old books. But there's a lot of philosophical discussions on art and life and how you should live. And of course, it's because it's kind of like a reverse Great Gatsby, where in the Great Gatsby, there's this one random guy who is really interested in this, like, younger, I guess maybe they're about the same age, Jay Gatsby, who's like this really popular, cool guy, and everybody loves him. And in this one, it's kind of reverse, where like the really rich guy takes an interest in this like almost nobody, but everybody loves him, and he's kind of smaller, younger. He's like, I'm going to implant all my ideas on him. Whereas in The Great Gatsby, Nick Carraway is like, I want to receive all of this stuff from him. I want to see what he thinks about everything and learn about him and write down stuff about him. In this one, it's the other way around, where it's like, I'm going to influence this guy. It was interesting to see how easy someone could be influenced. And I'm not talking about just the main character, but it's like just me reading it. I was like, wow, those are great points. And for being written as early as it was, there's a lot of lines in here where I'm like, wow, that is very specific. And I relate hard to that. Like, there's a lot of things in here I'm like, that's a concept that nobody really talks about, but we all do or think. Now, it is a little bit of a harder read because a lot of those things are like, the way that they're written and how complex the discussions are, it's a lot of like, okay, let me riddle this out what you're trying to say here. But weirdly enough, I did find that a lot of it wasn't terribly hard to, piece together or kind of parcel out and see what the main point was, which, I was scared getting back into reading, thinking like, am I just going to not understand half of this stuff? But I found that it actually wasn't, like, if you look at the overall conversation each time. That being said, of course, there's going to be a ton of conversations and dialogue where I'm like, dude, I don't even know what you're trying to get at with this or why the character is bringing this up. That happens in a lot of older fiction as well, where a lot of characters are saying things and you're like, what does this have to do with anything? I just got past those and I was like, let me get on to the other stuff. And of course, like Legend of Sleepy Hollow, there are a lot of words and paragraphs devoted to the nature and what it looked like outside and the bushes and the flowers and the birds and sometimes the food. And it was like a big thing to just describe every party that they went to and every event that they were at and what they were doing outside. And I guess that's to obviously just have the setting. That's kind of part of the story because they're just all these big, rich people, and that's just their lifestyle. So that's, I guess, kind of part of it, too. The ending was also very cool. It's something that I didn't really expect was going to happen, and it was kind of one of those endings you're coming up to it. You're like, there's only a couple pages left, and what's going on here? And it was very cool, and it just left me with a lot of stuff to think about. So Picture of Dorian Gray, probably one that maybe I'll actually read again later in my life and see just, how I've changed and, how I changed thinking about this book, which is pretty cool. At number 2, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I wanted to read it before the movie came out. And if you saw my review on the movie, you know that might have actually been a problem. But I was still very happy that I read this because I could know going in what I was getting into, because this was actually really good. I always get really nervous with prequels or even sequels, because I'm like, all right, you got your main series and your main world. It feels like, it's going to be different, but it should be sort of the same, and it's hard to strike that balance. Suzanne Collins did an amazing job with that in this book, striking the balance between it feels like the same world and some of these same characters, but a different time. The main villain of the Hunger Games being the main character in this, that is so hard to do because we know he's going to turn into this main villain, but we're actually empathizing with him for a lot of this book. Like, that's really, really weird and really hard to do, but it shows him as a human being and how he got there. Editing Matt here, one thing that I actually forgot to mention is actually one of the things I like most about the book, and one of the best parts is Suzanne Collins' detail in how Coriolanus thinks almost all the time, specifically politically, and how he looks to everybody else, his image, how he's representing himself. Because every single thing that he does, every action he takes, how it looks to people, he's thinking through all of that, because he doesn't want people thinking that A, he's going bankrupt, and B, that the whole Snow family is just going to disgrace. So he's thinking through all these angles and all these people, and everything that he does is very intentional, or at least to hide these facts. And Suzanne Collins thinks through this so thoroughly and so intricately with everything he does. Not only does it make the character feel that much more believable and real, but it's just impressive on the side that obviously if the character is thinking this, Suzanne Collins as the author also has to think through all of these different things. So the fact that we could really get into the mind of Coriolanus and see all of the possible angles that he's thinking at any given point was really impressive. And not only that, but I could kind of see how this is a younger version of the Snow we have in the books and the movies. It was really interesting, and I just applaud her on that for doing that. Aside from that, just the plot itself, the world, everything was just so cool. I liked the whole retro feel of it. I liked that we're kind of in the opposite, where we're in the capital, and that one of the capital people is the main character now, and seeing the districts as the outside. just kind of the whole opposite. And of course, then we still get like, a District 12 girl is the main tribute that we're following. If I'm being honest, I actually think I like Lucy Gray Baird way better than Katniss. Just something about her. She's electric. Her whole thing in the book is that people love watching her because she's colorful and interesting and fun and like very sweet. There's just so much in the way of just like how things came to be. I didn't even think about like they have the drones to send help in, and they have like people watching. How did that start? It was cool to realize that for the first 10, nobody even gave a shit. And then they were like, oh, let's make this more of a thing. Like the whole apprenticeship, and mentorship, and like all of it was just very interesting. I really liked it. And I will say, for being 500 some pages, which is the longest book I've read in a very long time, as quickly as I did, you burn through it because there's so much happening. Now, that being said, the last third was definitely my least favorite. I thought it was cool. It was a very different angle that I did not expect it to go. I found it kind of spinning its wheels for a while. It could have been shortened a little bit, I think. It definitely built up the suspense, but it was one of those books where, again, coming closer to the end, you're like, are we doing something here? Are we going to get to the end here? We're getting pretty close. And I would say the weakest part of the book is probably the last little bit, because although conceptually, just like as a scene, the scene is immaculate. I loved it. What it implies and what it actually does to wrap up the story feels so quick. Like, it doesn't really answer some things. It feels like Snow's turn at the end is so fast, and I feel like she could have like built it up a little bit more so that it made more sense when you have that turn. And again, this is something that I don't blame the movie for, because it was in the book. I think they did a very incredible job with that in the movie. That sucks because it's such a cool scene. But it was awesome. It was probably, I think it was the only, big franchise book that I read this year. And I loved getting back into the world, getting back into just like fun young adult reading. It reminded me of reading The Hunger Games, when I was a teenager. So it was really fun to read this. And I just felt pretty good getting through like an over 500 page book as quickly as I did, just burning through it. That was the first one where I was really like, all right, I'm back into reading daily, just like a ton, where I'm forgetting even the page counts that I'm reading, just because I'm not even sticking to, I got to read 30 pages a day. I'm just reading whatever I'm reading, wherever I'm at. Thank you to this book. It was really, really cool. I loved it. And finally, my favorite book that I read last year, The Girl Who Drank the Moon. This is the case of when a children's book is also for adults, because it's kind of like Pixar, where it's for children, but there's a lot of adult themes and depth and emotion that you can pick up on even as an adult, and actually only when you're an adult sometimes. This is one of those books that I just kept seeing authors and agents on their lists of favorite books of all time if they were a fantasy person. I can definitely see why, because it is a very easy read, but it's very entertaining, very fun, again, it's kind of cozy at times. It's kind of like it took the best parts of like Sun and filled them in with what I really, really wanted. Because the ending actually kind of reminds me a little bit of Sun. So the fantasy elements in here are so cool. I love all of the characters. They're very, very interesting. I liked all the different parts. There were some I liked definitely more than others. It's kind of one of those where you have like 3 or 4 different sections. They're all going to come together at the end. But I really liked it. It's about this girl who like develops ththese powers at a very young age, and then is kind of guarded from those powers until she's like 13, and then they're going to start to come out. And that's just a really fun idea. But it's not just the magic and the concepts in this book that I really loved. It is the writing. That is what really put it over the top, because there's just writing in fantasy especially that just makes it so, there's so much imagery, there's so much personification. I don't know how to put it. It's like the words themselves are making sounds and lighting up the page and really expressing not only what's happening in the story, but just the tone itself. And this just does that so well. Kelly Barnhill is an amazing writer in this respect, because the words she chooses, I love diction and syntax. I love picking just the right words and putting them together in ways that even if they don't technically make sense, it gives you a meaning that you're like, I get what you mean. That brings it on a deeper level that it's like, I couldn't explain this concept or feeling or emotion any other way. One of my favorite uses of this is in The Great Gatsby, The sentence goes something the way along the lines of, he sat for a moment waiting for the tuning fork that had been struck upon a star. That doesn't make sense at all. But a tuning fork and the sound that that makes, and a star being this bright thing in the sky, you can hear it. You can hear it. You can feel it. You can understand what he means by that in this grand universal, fate, I guess, that Jay Gatsby thought that he, was going to have with Daisy. It was just, I love word choice. Like here, this is just like one small example that I just skipped to. Spell after spell erupted from Luna's fingers and toes, from her ears and eyes. Her magic skittered and pulsed. Like, she just takes so many words, and it feels like you can see the magic working. You can see the spells, moving about. And again, it's just got so much emotion and love and great themes in it. And obviously there's darkness. And it's just one of those that it's very simple. It's very probably like a instant classic for children's books. It's very easy to read, but it's just so entertaining and captivating, and it's just a world that you want to continue to be in the whole time you're reading it. Not only for the world itself, but again for the writing, how it's written, which is so important, maybe even more important sometimes, because that's what's going to keep you there. Well, guys, I have talked for absolutely way too long about these books. Hopefully I can read more this year, and then I'll have to talk way more or just talk about them less per book next year. But this is something that I want to do every year, at least once, to talk about books, because I'm finally getting back into them. And I'm really excited about the ones that I'm going to be reading this year. And I think it would be fun to do like a little vlog just once, showing you all of like my bookshelf, because I have so many books on there that I have yet to read, and a lot that I have read already, but just all these other little trinkets and stuff. I just want to show off the bookshelf because it's fun. I guess that's what a book talker would do. And if you guys want to hear me talk a little bit about writing as well, and like all of my experience with that and just what I've been writing, everything, because I've been writing a series for ever, I can definitely make videos on that as well, because it's something that I'm really, really hitting the ground running with this year, hopefully to get it published somehow, whether that's traditionally or indie publishing, which I'm also very excited about. But if you guys want to hear me talk more about books, writing, anything like that, let me know in the comments below, because I would love to continue talking about this. I hope you guys liked this. It was a very different video. I haven't done anything like this yet. But if you liked it, obviously leave a like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff. And let me know what you've been reading. Let me know what's some good fantasy or classics to catch up on, or dystopian, because those are the ones that I've been getting into a lot recently. As always, keep your hopes high, your stress low, and books right in the middle. I'll see you guys later.